fantastic. Hi, Clint.
Good. How you doing?
Pal, I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad.
You are not doing too bad. You're fantastic. So you are...
Warner Brothers and its smoke, and I got to get him committed to the insane. Clint Eastwood, a name that has defined toughness, resilience, and an almost mythic presence in Hollywood for more than half a century. From his unforgettable roles in spaghetti westerns to his celebrated career as an award-winning director, Eastwood has been the embodiment of strength and grit. But now, whispers are swirling around a diagnosis that could not only threaten his health, but potentially bring his legendary career to an abrupt and heartbreaking halt. This isn't just another celebrity health scare. The nature of Eastwood's condition has sparked controversy, raising questions about how much we really know about the man behind the stoic facade. Fans, industry insiders, and medical experts alike are left wondering, is this the beginning of the end for one of cinema's most enduring icons? Or is there more to the story than meets the eye? In this video, we're diving into the unsettling news that has shocked Hollywood and stirred a storm of speculation. We'll explore the impact this diagnosis could have on Eastwood's life and legacy, while also considering the broader implications for aging stars facing similar battles. Stay with us as we unpack a story filled with uncertainty, resilience, and a legacy hanging in the balance. Clint Eastwood's role as the man with no name in the Dollars trilogy. Clint Eastwood's story begins in the heart of San Francisco, California, where he was born on May 31st, 1930, into a working-class family that couldn't have predicted the extraordinary path their son would eventually carve. Growing up during the Great Depression, Eastwood experienced hardship early in life. His father worked various jobs, often moving the family around, which instilled in young Clint a sense of adaptability and quiet resilience. These early years formed the backbone of the stoic, no-nonsense persona he would later bring to life on screen. His tall, lanky build and piercing stare didn't immediately lead to stardom. In fact, Eastwood's entrance into the entertainment industry was slow, methodical, and filled with rejection and small opportunities that barely hinted at the force he would one day become. By 1955, Clint Eastwood had officially begun his acting career, navigating the uncertainties of Hollywood as a relatively unknown talent. At first, his roles were minor and often uncredited. But even then, there was something about him that caught the eye. Quacter, a brooding intensity and a natural screen presence that didn't need many words to make an impression. His big break came in 1959, when he was cast in the television Western Rawhide, a show that ran until 1965 and became one of the most popular series of its era. Eastwood played Rowdy Yates, a young and impulsive cowboy, opposite Eric Fleming's more seasoned trail boss. While Rawhide wasn't critically revered, it turned Eastwood into a household name and provided him with the training ground to refine his acting style. Week after week, millions of Americans saw him ride, shoot, and scowl his way across dusty landscapes, laying the foundation for a career that would soon transcend the small screen. But it was what happened after Rawhide that truly changed everything. In 1964, Clint Eastwood took a chance on an unknown Italian director named Sergio Leone, who was assembling a gritty, unconventional western that would eventually be known as A Fistful of Dollars. It was the first in what would become the legendary Dollars trilogy, a series of films that catapulted Eastwood to international stardom. Shot on a low budget and released in Europe before reaching American theaters, A Fistful of Dollars introduced audiences to a new kind of Western hero, the man with no name, a quiet, morally ambiguous gunslinger who operated by his own code. The role required Eastwood to do more with less dialogue, less explanation, fewer traditional heroics, and he was a natural fit. His piercing eyes, subtle movements, and simmering intensity made the character instantly iconic. Following the success of A Fistful of Dollars, Eastwood reprised his role in For a Few Dollars More, 1965, and The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, 1966, both directed by Leone and now considered masterpieces of the spaghetti western genre. These films were revolutionary for their time, redefining not only the western archetype, but also the cinematic language of action, suspense, and anti-hero storytelling. While American studios initially dismissed them as foreign oddities, they quickly gained traction with audiences and critics, propelling Eastwood into the realm of international fame. No longer was he just a TV cowboy. He had become a cinematic icon, the embodiment of a new kind of American masculinity, one that embraced grit, ambiguity, and quiet strength. By 1967, Eastwood had firmly cemented his status as a global star. The Dollars trilogy not only made him a leading man, but also gave him the freedom to shape his own career on his own terms, something few actors in Hollywood were ever afforded. His partnership with Leone was especially transformative. Working in the unforgiving conditions of the Spanish desert, with sparse dialogue and exaggerated close-ups, taught Eastwood how to communicate with his eyes, his body, and his silence. He didn't need to overact or explain himself. He simply existed on screen, commanding attention without demanding it. These lessons would stay with him for the rest of his career, influencing not just his acting but also his future as a director. Though Eastwood's fame was secured by the end of the 1960s, what's most striking about this early phase of his career is how deliberate and quietly revolutionary it was. He didn't explode onto the scene with a flashy debut or an Oscar-winning performance. Instead, he built his legend one role at a time, through a mixture of tenacity, instinct, and an unshakable sense of who he was, or at least, who he was willing to be on screen. By the time Hollywood truly understood the power of Clint Eastwood, he had already redefined what a leading man could be. His characters weren't polished or perfect. They were rough, silent, and often morally complex, but they were real. And in many ways, they reflected the changing face of American cinema itself, a shift away from the glossy, idealized heroes of the past, towards something more grounded, human, and flawed. Clint Eastwood's controversial conservatism and the films that divided Hollywood. Clint Eastwood's transformation from a television cowboy to an international film icon was not just about the characters he played or the scripts he chose. It was also about the values he seemed to embody, both on and off screen. By the time Eastwood had firmly established himself in cinema's upper echelons, his persona had transcended fiction. He was no longer just the man with no name or Dirty Harry. He was Clint Eastwood, a cultural symbol, a voice, and eventually, a political figure. While the previous decades of his career were defined by artistic evolution and acclaim, the later stages became marked by public controversies and deep ideological divisions. His personal beliefs, political affiliations, and cinematic choices began to draw attention in a different light, not solely for their creative merit, but for what they appeared to represent in the broader American discourse. And as Eastwood continued to direct, act, and speak his mind, he found himself increasingly viewed not just as a filmmaker, but as a figure of contention, a man whose convictions sparked admiration in some quarters and criticism in others. Perhaps the most discussed and defining element of Eastwood's controversial image is his political conservatism. Unlike many of his Hollywood peers, Eastwood has consistently supported Republican politicians and causes, carving out a unique and often lonely position in an industry largely known for its liberal leanings. He has openly backed figures such as George W. Bush, and later, Donald Trump, decisions that caused waves both in the media and within his professional circle. His appearance at the 2012 Republican National Convention, where he delivered an improvised and widely debated speech to an empty chair meant to represent then-President Barack Obama, remains one of the most iconic and divisive moments in modern political stagecraft. For some, it was a courageous display of free expression. For others, it was an embarrassing and surreal moment that underscored how out of touch Eastwood had become with the cultural mainstream. Regardless of perspective, the incident solidified his status as one of the most politically outspoken figures in Hollywood. A rare conservative voice in a predominantly liberal town. That very positioning, the lone conservative in an ocean of progressive voices, contributed to Eastwood's reputation as a polarizing figure in the entertainment industry. While some admired his refusal to conform to Hollywood's ideological expectations, others found his views increasingly alienating. His political stance became inseparable from his professional identity, coloring public perception of his work, and sparking debates over the role of politics in art. It is perhaps this intersection, where personal ideology meets creative output, that explains the dual nature of Eastwood's legacy. To some, he remains a symbol of traditional American values, independence, resilience, and forthrightness. To others, he represents an outdated, inflexible worldview. For those who don't know the story, these three young Americans were in Paris or overseas in Europe on a trip that refuses to acknowledge the changing tides of social and political thought. This division has not necessarily diminished his stature, but it has ensured that his presence is always met with scrutiny and often controversy. Complicating Eastwood's public image further is the recurring criticism aimed at the thematic content of some of his films. As a director, Eastwood has never shied away from complex, morally ambiguous stories, many of which deal with violence, war, and the concept of justice. However, certain projects have drawn specific backlash for what critics describe as an uncritical glorification of war. Films such as American Sniper, 2014, while commercially successful and praised by some for their realism, were also condemned for allegedly presenting a narrow, one-sided perspective on military conflict. Critics pointed out that while Eastwood's direction often captures the intensity and trauma of combat, it sometimes skirts deeper exploration of the geopolitical, ethical, and emotional consequences of war. This, they argue, contributes to a simplified narrative, one that honors bravery and sacrifice,
Yes.
but without fully confronting the broader costs of militarism. Eastwood, for his part, has maintained that his films aim to provoke thought, not dictate ideology. Still, the accusation that some of his work leans toward uncritical patriotism continues to follow him, particularly among audiences who expect more nuanced commentary on modern warfare. Another layer to Eastwood's complicated relationship with the public comes from the language used in some of his films, which has sparked outrage and critical backlash. Throughout his career, Eastwood has been known for portraying gritty, unvarnished characters who speak in raw and often controversial terms. But in recent years, dialogues featuring racial slurs and offensive expressions, particularly in films like Gran Torino, 2008, have drawn pointed criticism. While defenders argue that such language is used to illustrate the flawed nature of certain characters or to reflect societal realities, detractors believe it crosses a line, perpetuating stereotypes or giving implicit license to harmful language under the guise of authenticity. The debate, in essence, centers around intention versus impact. Does Eastwood include these elements to challenge viewers and depict uncomfortable truths? Or do they serve to normalize language that should have no place in modern cinema? Clint Eastwood's acting performance, acclaimed director, and small-town mayor Clint Eastwood's path through the American cultural landscape has been anything but linear. And as he transitioned from being a rugged fixture on television screens and spaghetti westerns to a powerhouse filmmaker and civic leader, the evolution of his career only deepened the complexity of his public persona. After the explosive fame he earned through Rawhide and the Dollars trilogy, Eastwood made a defining move in 1971, one that marked the beginning of a long and prolific directing career. That year, he starred in and directed Play Misty for Me, a psychological thriller that offered a stark contrast to the westerns and war films that had defined him thus far. The film was not only a commercial success, but a strong statement that Eastwood was more than just an actor with a steely gaze. He was a filmmaker with a distinct point of view. By choosing a story about obsession and vulnerability, and setting it in the foggy coastal cliffs of Northern California, Eastwood demonstrated a sharp instinct for tone and tension. It was his first foray behind the camera, but it would lay the groundwork for decades of directorial ambition. The same year, Eastwood also stepped into the role that would forever cement his status as a cultural icon. Inspector Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry. The character, a no-nonsense San Francisco cop who wielded a .44 Magnum and a take-no-prisoners attitude became both wildly popular and deeply controversial. For some, Dirty Harry was a cinematic embodiment of frontier justice adapted to an urban setting. A man who cut through bureaucratic red tape and did what needed to be done. For others, it symbolized authoritarian overreach and glorified violence. Regardless of where one stood on the character, there was no denying its impact. Harry Callahan wasn't just a role. He became a lightning rod in national conversations about law, order, and morality. The success of the film spawned a series of sequels and firmly established Eastwood as more than a former Western star. He was now a bona fide movie star and a significant influence in shaping the ethos of 1970s and 1980s American masculinity. But Eastwood's cinematic evolution didn't end there. In 1992, after years of acting and steadily honing his directorial voice, he delivered what is widely regarded as one of the greatest modern westerns ever made, Unforgiven. Eastwood not only directed the film, but starred in it as William Money, an aging outlaw pulled out of retirement for one last job. Unforgiven was a stark, brooding film that upended the tropes of traditional westerns and interrogated the myths Eastwood had helped build in his earlier career. It stripped away the glamour of frontier violence and asked hard questions about justice, morality, and the cost of redemption. The film was a critical and commercial triumph, earning Eastwood 2 Academy Awards, Best Director and Best Picture, and re-establishing him as a serious filmmaker capable of profound storytelling. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a redefinition, proving that his career was far from static and that he was willing to critique the very archetypes that had made him famous. The early 90s also saw Eastwood stepping into a role entirely removed from the film industry: public service. From 1993 to 1995, he served as the mayor of Carmel by the Sea, California, a small, picturesque coastal town he had long called home. Eastwood had always exhibited an independent streak, and his decision to run for office reflected his frustration with local bureaucracy, particularly a dispute over a business permit. Once elected, he served with characteristic pragmatism, working to streamline the permit process and advocating for small business owners. While his tenure as mayor was limited to 1 term, it underscored his willingness to take action and his desire to be more than just a celebrity with opinions. He wanted to be a citizen who made a tangible difference in his community. This brief political chapter also aligned with his deeply rooted belief in personal responsibility, minimal government interference, and direct problem-solving, principles that frequently echo through his cinematic narratives. A little over a decade later, Eastwood once again captivated the world, this time with a film that showcased his mastery of emotional storytelling and his continued growth as a director. In 2004, he directed $1 Million Baby, a quietly devastating drama about a female boxer and her aging trainer. The film was unexpected in its elegance and brutal honesty, delving into themes of ambition, loss, dignity, and moral complexity. It featured powerhouse performances by Hilary Swank and Morgan Freeman, but it was Eastwood's restrained yet potent direction that earned widespread acclaim. He had aged into a filmmaker of immense sensitivity, able to tell stories that were both intimate and universal. $1 Million Baby went on to win multiple Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, marking yet another high point in Eastwood's extraordinary career. It was not only a testament to his storytelling capabilities, but also an example of how he had transitioned from playing tough guys to exploring the fragility of the human condition. Vigilante justice, racial stereotypes, and political polarization in his films and public life. Clint Eastwood's legacy as one of Hollywood's most iconic figures is both celebrated and controversial, a duality that has followed his career for decades. While he is widely respected for his contributions as an actor, director, and cultural icon, Eastwood's work and public persona have often sparked intense debate, particularly when it comes to the themes and messages in his films and his outspoken political views. A key source of controversy began with Eastwood's breakout role as Dirty Harry in the 1971 film Dirty Harry and its subsequent sequels. These films catapulted Eastwood into stardom and helped define the archetype of the tough, no-nonsense cop. But they also ignited serious criticism for their perceived endorsement of vigilante justice and police brutality. The character of Harry Callahan is a lawman who often operates outside the bounds of legal authority, using excessive force and bending rules to get results. For many, this glorification of extrajudicial violence struck a dangerous chord. The early 1970s were a turbulent time in America, with civil rights movements, anti-war protests, and debates over law enforcement's role in society dominating the national conversation. The Dirty Harry films, with their blunt celebration of a hard-edged cop who takes justice into his own hands, were seen by critics as reinforcing a militarized, aggressive style of policing that glossed over the systemic issues behind crime and social unrest. While supporters argued, the films reflected the frustrations of a society desperate for order and safety. Opponents feared they promoted a culture where due process and civil liberties were undervalued. This debate has only grown more relevant in recent years, as discussions about police conduct and accountability continue to dominate public discourse. Moving ahead several decades, Eastwood faced renewed scrutiny with his 2008 film Gran Torino, which he also directed and starred in. The movie follows a gruff Korean War veteran living in a changing Detroit neighborhood, who forms an unlikely friendship with his Hmong immigrant neighbors. Gran Torino was praised for tackling themes of racial tension, cultural clash, and personal redemption, but it did not escape criticism. Some viewers and commentators pointed out the film's use of racial slurs and its portrayal of Asian characters, arguing that it perpetuated racial stereotypes rather than challenged them. The dialogue includes offensive language that many found jarring, raising questions about the film's intentions. Was Eastwood's use of harsh language meant to authentically depict social realities, or did it inadvertently reinforce damaging stereotypes? The main character's journey toward acceptance and change was seen by some as a hopeful message about bridging cultural divides. However, the reliance on stereotypes and the use of racially charged language made others uncomfortable, sparking debate about whether the film succeeded in fostering empathy or simply replicated prejudice in a different form. This controversy underscored Eastwood's complex relationship with race and identity in his work, a relationship that often invites both admiration and criticism. Perhaps one of the most politically charged controversies surrounding Eastwood came with the 2014 film American Sniper, which he directed. The film tells the story of Chris Kyle, a Navy SEAL sniper with the most confirmed kills in U.S. military history. American Sniper was commercially successful and critically acclaimed, earning several Academy Award nominations, but it also sparked significant backlash. Critics argued that the film presented a politically biased, one-sided portrayal of war that glorified militarism without sufficiently grappling with the moral ambiguities and human costs of combat. Many felt that the depiction of Middle Eastern characters was overly simplistic and stereotypical, reducing complex geopolitical conflicts to a binary of good versus evil. The film's patriotic tone was seen by detractors as a form of hagiography that overlooked the broader implications of American military intervention. On the other hand, Supporters praised American Sniper for honoring the sacrifices of service members and for its intense personal storytelling. The polarized responses to the film mirrored wider cultural divisions in America regarding war, patriotism, and representation. American Sniper became a flashpoint in ongoing debates about how war is portrayed in popular media and about the responsibilities of filmmakers when engaging with sensitive real-world topics. It further cemented Eastwood's reputation as a filmmaker unafraid to court controversy and tackle contentious issues head-on. Eastwood's controversies are not confined to his film work. His political statements and public appearances have also drawn attention, and sometimes sharp criticism. A notable example occurred during the 2012 Republican National Convention when Eastwood delivered a speech that quickly went viral due to its unscripted improvisational style. The highlight was an extended interaction with an empty chair symbolizing then-President Barack Obama. The unconventional speech was polarizing. Some applauded Eastwood's candid, off-the-cuff remarks and saw his performance as a bold, humorous break from traditional political speeches. Others viewed the act as disrespectful and distracting from serious political issues. The empty chair moment became emblematic of Eastwood's willingness to express his conservative views in ways that challenge Hollywood's predominantly liberal culture. His public support for Republican figures like George W. Bush and Donald Trump, as well as his critique of liberal policies, have made him a divisive figure in the entertainment industry. This political positioning has alienated some of his peers and fans while earning him admiration among conservative audiences, further deepening the cultural divide surrounding his persona. The 2012 convention speech remains one of the most memorable instances of Eastwood using his celebrity platform to convey political messages, illustrating the intersection of his artistry and activism in the public eye. Clint Eastwood's battle with a progressive neurological diagnosis. Clint Eastwood, an enduring icon of Hollywood, and a figure synonymous with toughness, resilience, and a commanding presence both on and off the screen, has recently been confronted with a devastating personal challenge that threatens to upend the very fabric of his storied career and public life. Now, Eastwood's health has become a subject of serious concern following reports of a tragic diagnosis that could potentially bring an end to his active involvement in the entertainment industry. This diagnosis has sent ripples through Hollywood and among his vast fan base, shaking the perception of the indomitable figure who has captivated audiences for over 6 decades. Eastwood's legacy is built on an image of unyielding strength, a man whose characters, whether it was the no-nonsense, gritty police inspector Harry Callahan in the Dirty Harry series, or the complex Us, haunted loners in Unforgiven and Gran Torino, seemed impervious to hardship. His persona blended toughness with a nuanced sense of morality, creating cinematic legends that defined a genre and an era. However, the recent revelation about his health underscores a sobering reality. Even icons of his magnitude are vulnerable to the frailties of age and illness. The very qualities that made Eastwood a symbol of perseverance and power are now challenged by a medical condition that threatens his physical and cognitive capacities. According to reliable sources close to Eastwood, the diagnosis involves a progressive neurological disorder, one that affects both motor function and cognitive faculties. This type of condition, often associated with diseases such as Parkinson's or similar degenerative illnesses, can severely impact a person's ability to perform everyday tasks, let alone the demanding physical and mental exertions required by acting and directing. While Eastwood has been famously private about his personal life, insiders reveal that this diagnosis has introduced a difficult and uncertain chapter into his life. For a man who built a career on physicality, sharp instincts, and intense focus, this news is particularly poignant. Medical experts highlight that such neurological conditions often necessitate comprehensive treatment and significant lifestyle changes. The progressive nature of these illnesses means symptoms worsen over time, affecting mobility, speech, memory, and decision-making. For Eastwood, whose career has thrived on his ability to deliver precise performances and make quick, impactful directorial decisions, the implications are profound. Yet, reports indicate that Eastwood is facing this challenge with the characteristic determination and resilience that have long defined him. Friends, family, and colleagues have expressed their support, emphasizing his strength in confronting the diagnosis, even as they acknowledge the difficulty it poses. Eastwood's remarkable career, spanning nearly 7 decades, reflects not only his talent, but an extraordinary work ethic and creative vision. Starting his acting journey in 1955, he first gained public recognition on the television series Rawhide, which ran from 1959 to 1965. His breakout film role came shortly after with Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy in the mid-1960s, where he became an international sensation. defining the spaghetti western genre with his iconic portrayal of the man with no name. This trilogy propelled Eastwood into global stardom, showcasing his ability to combine a stoic presence with subtle emotional depth. In 1971, Eastwood made his directorial debut with Play Misty for Me, marking the beginning of a successful parallel career behind the camera. His portrayal of the hard-edged yet deeply flawed Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry solidified his status as a cultural icon, embodying the archetype of the tough, morally ambiguous hero who operates outside the law to achieve justice. Later, Eastwood's direction brought him critical acclaim and Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture, demonstrating his mastery over storytelling that explored the complexity of violence and redemption. This film, alongside $1 Million Baby, 2004, further cemented Eastwood's reputation as a filmmaker capable of tackling emotionally charged and morally intricate narratives, earning him additional Oscars. Beyond his cinematic achievements, Eastwood also ventured into public service. This period revealed another facet of Eastwood's multifaceted life, showing his engagement with community and governance. Even in his later years, Eastwood remained professionally active, continuing to direct and act in films that often revisited themes of aging, reflection, and human struggle. However, this recent diagnosis introduces an unpredictable element to Eastwood's future. While he has shown remarkable vigor for his age, the challenges posed by a progressive neurological disease may force a re-evaluation of how he approaches his work and public life. Sources close to him suggest that Eastwood is adapting by focusing more on projects that require less physical exertion, while still allowing him to exercise his creative instincts. His enduring passion for storytelling remains undiminished, but the scope of his involvement might inevitably change.